Good evening and welcome to First Issues. Tonight's program begins with a conversation with an author and professor who argues that using GDP as the only measure of a country's success is an extremely flawed practice. Later in the show, we sit down with Grammy Award-winning musician Earl Klugh to get a first-hand account of his journey in the music industry. We thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show. An article titled "Hopeless Africa," written in 2000 in The Economist, a worldwide respected magazine, painted a picture of a decaying and moribund continent. Many countries such as Sierra Leone, Mozambique, Madagascar, Ethiopia and Zimbabwe were described as having degenerated into shambles, deluged by floods, famine and succumbed to government-sponsored thuggery, while poverty and pestilence continue unabated. Just over a decade later, and there appears to be a change of heart at The Economist, and Africa is seen as a hopeful continent. African countries, the likes of Ghana, Eritrea and Ethiopia, are among the world's top 10 growth performers, and others, the likes of Zambia, among the reformers. The Economist says over the past decade, 6 of the world's 10 fastest growing countries were African. In 8 of the past 10 years, Africa has grown faster than East Asia, including Japan. But what does it mean that Africa is rising? Giving a lecture in Maputo, Mozambique recently, Professor Lorenzo Fioramonti of the University of Pretoria, Center for the Study of Governance Innovation, said the Africa Rising discourse is flawed and has many shortcomings. Africa is the world's fastest growing continent at present, and GDP is expected to grow at an average of 6% over the next decade, not least thanks to foreign direct investment. FDI has grown from 15 billion in 2002 to 37 billion in 2006 and to 46 billion in 2012. Many goods and services that were scarce, like telephones, are now widely available. Africa has 3 mobile phones for every 4 people, same as India. And by 2017, 30% of all households are expected to have television sets, an almost 5-fold increase in 10 years. If one looks at the gross domestic product, GDP, of the world's top 10 countries in GDP growth rates for 2012, few were African. Libya tops the list with 100% growth in 2012. This means the economy doubled in size in 1 year. Libya is followed by Sierra Leone, Niger and Ivory Coast. In 2013, however, only 2 African countries were among the top 10, South Sudan and Sierra Leone. Libya went negative altogether, with GDP shrinking by 5%. So what does GDP tell us about the health of the economy, let alone its sustainability? Professor Lorenzo Fioramonti of the University of Pretoria, Center for Governance Innovation, is of the view that using GDP to determine the economic growth of a country is not only flawed, but has a lot of shortcomings. He joins us tonight to interrogate what he has termed the gross domestic problem. Welcome back to the show. Professor Lorenzo Fioramonti of the University of Pretoria is of the view that using GDP to determine the economic growth of a country is not only flawed, but has a lot of shortcomings. He joins us tonight to interrogate what he has termed the gross domestic problem.
Well, GDP doesn't tell us almost anything about the health and prosperity of an economy. I mean, the acronym stands for Gross Domestic Product. And how many people have ever wondered why we use a measure that is gross to tell us whether we're doing well economically speaking? Because we never consider the costs of achieving the type of production that GDP measures. That's why it's called gross. It doesn't measure the costs. It is the same as if I'm considering all the money I make as an entrepreneur without considering how much money I need to invest in my company in order to make that money. And often what we see is that the investment that goes into producing the economic output, which is measured by GDP, actually exceeds the profit we make out of GDP. But simply because the number never measures the costs, social, environmental, and economic costs, we end up considering we're producing wealth, but often those costs tend to exceed the amount of money that the country makes. So we are arguing that we need measures that go beyond this idea of separating costs and gains, that actually should try and measure the costs of a certain system of production, of a certain way of extracting resources from the ground, and so on and so forth, and offsetting it against the gains, the economic gains that we take out of it. So this is why GDP, like other measures that are gross, make us blind to the costs of the type of development model that we have. And this can very much mislead our governments in the decisions that they take when they consider, for instance, whether they want to open a new mine, whether they want to build a dam, whether they want to build shopping malls and skyscrapers, because they only see, GDP only tells us that money is being produced, because it doesn't consider how much will it cost environmentally, socially, actually, to clean up the damage after building a dam, or clean up the damage after building a mine, and so on and so forth. So, interestingly, GDP measures as productive activities traffic jams. If I use drugs, if I'm a drug addict, actually that adds GDP because I'm spending money to buy drugs, and GDP will actually increase. If there are divorces and people divorce, we need to go to court, lawyers will be hired, GDP increases. If there are insurance payments that have to be paid because of a traffic accident, because of a car accident, or because of a sickness or a disease, GDP grows. GDP sees every transaction, regardless of whether it's a good one or a bad one for society, as increasing our economic well-being. That is extremely misleading.
I'm sure that, of course, raises issues of sustainability then with regards to that model.
Absolutely. GDP doesn't tell us anything regarding the sustainability of our development model. You may very well dig your ground to exhaustion, destroy all your forests, and build houses that nobody is using all over your territory, and your economy in terms of GDP will boom. But actually those things will create enormous damage that somebody will have to pay for. And so it's like taking a loan, getting some cash now, and postponing the day of reckoning. And then when the day of reckoning comes, then you're going to be faced with increasing social and economic costs. Take the case of China. We've been celebrating the expansion of the Chinese economy for about 10 years now. Now the Chinese leadership is realizing what is the cost of having done so. And even the Chinese leadership is letting go of GDP as a measure of economic progress. They think it's been misleading to use GDP as a way of promoting the people within the ranks of the administration, within the ranks of government and politicians, and so on and so forth. Because now they're facing the environmental costs of that model of production. They're facing the social costs, they're facing the healthcare costs, and they're realizing probably the bill is more expensive than they thought. And by some estimates, the entire Chinese economic boom may evaporate when they have to start paying for the costs of that model of production. So this idea that only money that flows in an economy counts, only that regardless of whether it's directed at good activities that increase well-being, or whether it's directed at bad activities that decrease well-being, is very misleading. We have to be able to separate economic activities that add value and economic activities that do not add value.
Professor Fioramonti's suggestion of a completely new way of looking at our economic reality is gaining momentum around the world. How, therefore, have economic bodies the likes of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund reacted to this proposition? For answers to this question, join us next week, this time on this very channel. Next on the program, we focus on a much lighter subject, music, specifically the story of one of the profession's most celebrated icons. Welcome back to First Issues, as in this segment of the show, we take a look at what it takes to become a world-class musician. Last week, we spoke to the sponsors of the FNB All That's Jazz show, as they were eagerly anticipating the second ever installment of the event, with the arrival and performance of certified music legend Earl Klugh this past Sunday. Tonight we show that they were not the only stakeholders who could not wait for the musician's performance and all it entailed, as jazz lovers, music promoters and technicians, and even music retail stores all stood poised for his first ever performance in the country. But what is it about this 61-year-old guitar player from Detroit, USA, that sent a chain reaction reverberating through different segments and sectors of our nation? Local jazz aficionados, Shima Monageng, Uncle Shima as he's affectionately known in his circles, as well as Harry Kwata, tried to tell us how this American has stolen his way into Botswana jazz consumers' hearts. Harry says it is because of Earl's contemporary sound that is especially appreciated by female jazz lovers. He says the almost tangible excitement that was felt up to weeks before the star's arrival was fueled by the fact that, unlike other performers in the genre, Earl's music is danceable, music that is guaranteed to get a crowd on its feet.
Earl Klugh plays more or less relaxed jazz, if you may say that. And one of the songs that obviously is in the back of my mind that is very popular here is Tropical Lakes. And most people don't even know that it's played by Earl Klugh. He's the same guy who plays the same song, and I expect him, when he plays it on Sunday, everybody will be up on their feet.
The entire F&B Bank and Lorado, we have a special song for you. It goes something like this.
Uncle Shima also asserts that Earl's appeal stems largely from the unique style that has become his trademark over the years. Having seen the musician perform in other countries, Mr. Monageng says our subject this evening not only puts on a good show, but that his caliber of performance is one that can even have lasting benefits for the location or country in which it is being staged.
Earl Klugh is a world-class artist. He has performed at various places, various countries. I personally watched him twice in South Africa, in Joburg and in Cape Town, and he always brings the roof down, as the young ones would say. So coming to Botswana for the first time, I think a lot of, not I think because I've heard from a lot of people here that are really looking forward to Earl Klugh's performance on the 12th of October. And I must add that indeed FNB gave us a kind of a surprise, because these kind of shows, you normally hear about them like 4 months, 5 months before it does happen. Just 2 months ago, they told us Earl Klugh is coming. So it's a very, very big surprise. A show of this nature, a Grammy award-winning artist, a world-class artist, coming to Botswana, I believe even people outside Botswana are likely to come over here and watch the show. And we must not forget that it's not only those who are going to attend the show that are going to benefit. The country itself, the nation itself is going to benefit, because music, especially at this level, does contribute to the GDP of the country. And also it does put the country on a map, on a world map. A lot of people are going to benefit. Remember, Elizabeth is saying is going to perform. The issues of stage and sound, they're going to benefit. Grand Palm is going to benefit, of course. And like I said, the GDP is going to actually contribute in a way to the GDP, because we see it happening in South Africa. When we talk of the jazz in South Africa, whether it's the Joy of Jazz Festival or the Cape Town International Jazz Festival, after the show, you realize that thousands and thousands of bucks have been left.
Uncle Shima is definitely onto something there when he speaks of the economic benefits of hosting a world-class artist. We here at First Issues found out from a representative of an international music retail store that performances by such artists result in such a direct surge in music CD sales locally that their particular music store franchise has to prepare for weeks in advance to be able to meet customer demand.
Mostly, the artists we bring more stock, like this weekend, like El Clue. Re tla be re le ka go tisa stock se sentsi e be re le ka go advertise le gona ko ntle mo di radiong kgotsa kae mme hela gore sologala molemo ka gore di sales tsa rona di a tsholetsega.
The flurry of activity was not only evident in the music retail arena. Media practitioners and photographers were groomed on how to cover a world-class event. Local musicians got ready to hold their own on such a prominent career-boosting platform. Botswana promoter and event manager Oliver Groth, known for staging the smaller but much-loved Botswana craft shows, also got a chance to test his chops, taking on what is arguably one of the biggest national concerts.
Well, it's a huge effort, mainly from the technical side, the sound and lighting, to get the right equipment that the artists are happy using. That is probably the biggest challenge. And then, of course, the actual logistics like transport, making sure they arrive on time, comfortable, well taken care of. The artists are our main priority here. Artists and the technical people who are just over here, because they make the show.
After months of preparation and anticipation, the man responsible for such ripple effects of excitement and activity throughout the country finally set foot on Botswana's soil. And as final preparations went on at the Gaborone International Convention Center, Earl Clue fans looked forward to ending their long wait to see him perform live in what promised to be a first-class extravaganza. And we here at First Issues also readied ourselves for the moment of truth. Commentators say that the man's graceful and refined music was indicative of his actual personality. But did this prove to be true? Stay tuned to find out what we discovered when we spoke to Earl Clue face to face, to extract from him pearls of wisdom that could greatly benefit our own aspiring musicians and thus invigorate the industry. Welcome back to the show as we now sit down with a man whose arrival had clearly been much anticipated in the country. Earl Clue has succeeded in achieving what only a small percentage of the world's population has ever managed to do: have a music career spanning decades and enjoying attention and crowds all over the world. Tonight, he shares his story with us. Good evening, Earl, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
A read of your biography makes it look as if you've had a pretty straightforward and smooth ride to the career you have today. Is this true?
Yeah, I think I've been very, very fortunate and very lucky in my career. And I try to honor that by playing as well as I can and writing the best music and of course having the greatest musicians on the planet along with me. So this is it's a lot of fun. We've been having a great time.
Are you at a place where you would say you have done all you can, you're successful, or is there more you'd still like to do?
Oh, I'd just like to keep doing it.
Who has been the most instrumental in your career? Could you single out a single person?
Oh, sure, George Benson. I met George when I was 17 years old. And he took me under his wing because he was interested in the fact that I was a black guy playing acoustic guitar, you know, classical guitar. And George always exaggerates, but he would say stuff like, he says, Earl, man, if you can just do this just for another couple of years, just hold on, you're gonna make all the money, because, you know, he just goes through these. I'm like, George, don't start doing that. You know, I was a kid. He says, man, this guy's gonna be the #1 musician of the year. And, you know, he just busted up like that. And I'm like, oh, man. And so, you know, I looked at it and I said, man, you know, looking back, it's like, man, I was luckier than anything you could imagine, you know, because it just like kind of was there. Yeah.
Was there ever a point, though, where you doubted that you could make a career out of this talent that you had?
I was hopeful. You know, I was hopeful that I could make a career of it. You know, there are a lot of great players in Detroit, and I mean, and when you look back over the players and who they are, you know, it's unbelievable. I think it's unmatched except for like New York for talent. You know, during that time. Yeah, so we were very lucky.
Was there a different set of circumstances trying to navigate the system maybe for an African American man than there was for somebody else, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's not a completely difficult road, but challenging enough. I'll tell you, challenging enough from time to time. Yeah, but that's all part of life, and all part of you know, the things that come out over the years. You know, when you're trying to find other styles and ways to play. You know, I playing the nylon string guitar, I got teased a lot, and I ended up buying an electric guitar, and I thought that it would be as easy as the acoustic guitar, but it was so foreign to me after I got the electric guitar. And I says, well, what's the use? You know, I got to go back and play the other thing. You know, so I learned something from that. You know, it's not as easy as it looks, I guess is what you say. You know, yeah.
In your endeavors to give back and inspire other musicians, maybe you could have a word for our local aspiring musicians, maybe a young person really watching this show right now who, yeah, what kind of words of wisdom and inspiration do you usually share?
You have to have a love of what you're doing, and it's got to be a really deep and defined thing in your head, you know, because it's just when I see some of the younger kids, you know, I can almost feel it and see that this guy's going to make it, or this guy's going to make it. You know, you get those feelings because you can see when someone has that drive, you know, that just hunger for it. You know, and that's.
We trust that our conversations this evening have inspired somebody out there in much the same way. Until next week and another issue of Interest, I, Nameto Sibina, the team behind First Issues, and our sponsors, First National Bank, wish you a good night and pleasant viewing.